Welcome to this online lecture in which we will cover chapter 5 on the strategic networks and platforms. When we refer to strategic networks and platforms, it mainly relates to supply chain management. My aim with this online lecture is to keep it interactive. So I will ask you to read an article, answer some questions, and also do some OTQ questions and some longer questions. So I'm asking you to please participate in it. Otherwise, it's going to become a very one-sided type of lecture. And if you don't partake in the activities, you could just as well just go through the slides on your own with the textbook. And I think you will get more benefit from it and you will waste less time. So where does all of this fit into the rational model? So we know that the rational model consists of, firstly, starting with the mission, vision, objectives. We've covered that in chapter 2. Then we go on to performing a corporate appraisal, or also referred to as a SWOT analysis, where we identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. And if you look there at the opportunities and threats, the tool that we use to identify those opportunities and threats are the external analysis. And we have covered external analysis in chapter 4. So the external analysis basically consists of conducting a PESTEL analysis, then going into the industry, the 5 forces analysis, and an analysis of the competitors. And all of these environments are impacted by the drivers of change, which consists of digitization, globalization, automation, etc. So what we're doing today is we're looking at the strategic networks and platforms. And those basically deal with connected stakeholders. So connected stakeholders are mainly suppliers and customers. And they're not fully external to the organization, but they're also not fully internal. So when you conduct a SWOT, you could identify strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that are presented in your supply chains. So when we look at a layout of what is covered in the chapter, you will see that it's supply chain, as we said, and you need to differentiate between a push model and a pull model of supply chain management. And then we're looking at upstream supply chain versus downstream supply chain. During today's lecture, the part 1, we're going to look at only the upstream side. So we're going to first start off with defining supply chain, differentiating between a push and a pull system, defining the upstream parties within a supply chain system, and looking at how technologies impact the upstream side of supply chain management. As always, we're just going to look at the outcomes for you to understand how this content will be tested. So let's just first start with the topics that we're going to cover. We're going to look at the value creation or the value chains within a specific ecosystem, participants and the interaction within the networks and platforms, and the participants will be the suppliers and your customers, and how do you interact with them? How does technology enable these networks, and the process of creating networks and platforms using technology. Stakeholder analysis within networks. Stakeholder analysis have been done in chapter 2 and corporate social responsibility in chapter 3. If we look at the lead outcome, it will be, what am I going to ask you? How are you going to apply these topics? You will be required to discuss the impact of supplier and customer value chains on the organization's strategy. In specific outcomes, discuss the impact of strategic networks on organizational strategy, and conduct stakeholder analysis on networks. So when we start, I'm going to ask you to read the article entitled Strategic Supply Chain Management, and you will find that article posted on ULink in under section 3 in the article section. So I'm going to give you time to read that article, and then I want you to answer the following questions. And how I want you to answer it, you don't have to answer it on a piece of paper. You can just highlight the answer either on your hard copy or on your PDF copy. So firstly, the question that I want you to answer is, what is supply chain management? Why supply chain management? What are the risks of supply chain management? What is the relationship between competencies and the level of engagement between the parties in the supply chain? What are the benefits of proper supply chain management? What are the practices? What practices are common for successful supply chain management? So I want you to now pause this video, read the article and answer the questions. What I like about this article is an older article. It's published in 2007. It was a CIMA article, and it explains the whole process of supply chain management. And a lot of the content covered in that article is also what we're going to be covering in the lecture slides. Going to expand on some of them, and that is what, so answer these questions, and then as we go through the content, I'm going to refer back to the article and the questions that you have answered. So I'm going to jump around between these slides and the article. Okay, so let's go to the article and look at the first two questions. What is supply chain management, and why do we have supply chain management? You will see I have to now jump between different pages, and it might take a while. I can unfortunately not stop the recording, so you just need to bear with me while I'm jumping to the other window. Okay, so here we have the article. Just make sure that it is on your screen as well. Okay, there you have it now. Let me just go back to mine, and you will see, firstly, I've asked you to define or explain what supply chain management is. And according to this article, supply chain management is a concept that involves the coordination of operations from the supply of raw material to the end of the supply chain, all the way down to the consumer in the end. So supply chain basically refers to that process where information and activities are coordinated from the raw material up to the supply of the product to the end user. And it's the management of that whole system. And typically, supply chain management is a logical progression from tools such as material requirement planning, which is economic order quantity, enterprise resource planning, which is advanced inventory management systems, and customer relationship management. And you will see as we progress through this whole chapter that all these things are highly linked into a supply chain management system. And so further just on explaining what a supply chain is, in its simplest form, a supply chain is a series of that supply each other along a continuous pipeline running from the point of raw materials to where it's extracted to the point which customers are supplied. But situations are normally more complex than that. And if you look at a typical supply chain management system, you would see, and this is also still a simple web, you have suppliers that supply to a range of manufacturers and distributors and meeting the needs of different customers in the end. So supply chain management, we normally think of it as just really a plain, straightforward process. But in actual fact, it is the integration of a lot of different companies supplying one another. If you just think, for example, about of Clover. Clover is a dairy company that manufacture milk products, cheeses, etc., yogurts. They have a range of suppliers. They don't only supply to Checkers, they also supply to ShopRite, they supply to Pick n Pay, they supply to Spar, they supply to Woolworths. So in that, the supply chain becomes a lot more complex with different suppliers and then also different customers that you need to satisfy. So that was question number one. What is supply chain management? The second part is why supply chain management? What is the objective? So if we look here at this sentence, the object is to achieve synergies that benefit every player along the chain. Okay, so the way in which, in a supply chain management system, the way in which these companies are linked with one another, they should achieve synergies between the different parties, and in order that the benefit, so the main aim, if we look at this sentence over here, is the supply chain should be able to save costs while also adding value. So you're doing things more beneficial in order to save cost, but you're also servicing the needs of your customers better, while you're benefiting all the players within the supply chain. Then, so that is in terms of what is supply chain management and what are the benefits of supply chain management. Okay, so once again, just bear with me so I can actually just switch between the two applications. Let's go back to once again, you can just check that you have the same screen as what I have. Right. So what is supply chain? As we have said now, it's the coordination of activities and information to transform goods from its origin of raw materials to the final consumption by the end user. And why has this become so important? Because businesses can no longer just consider their own companies and the immediate impact on their suppliers and immediate customers. You have to consider all the players in the market and the value that's been added and the way in which they conduct business. For example, if you think of Nike, a few years ago they had a scandal on child labor in one of the suppliers' factory. But if you go and actually read what happened, it wasn't a direct supplier of Nike, one of the suppliers of a supplier where the child labor took place. So in today's world, you can't say, I don't know what is happening lower down in the supply chain. You have to, all parties within the supply chain need to subscribe to the same values and need to add their part in actually adding value to the end user. Okay, because problems anywhere in the ecosystem, as it says there, because problems anywhere in the ecosystem can have a significant impact on the business. So let's look at an example. I have an example of a basic supply chain, which is the Coca-Cola supply chain. If you think of Coca-Cola, they're the main company within the delivering of Coca-Cola beverages. So if you go, if you look at the agriculture, the ingredients, the sourcing of supplies, that is referred to as the upstream supply chain. So think of a supply chain as a river that flows. So upstream would be the start of the supply chain, and downstream would then refer to all the other customers. So if you think of Coca-Cola, they have a range of suppliers that supply them with the sugar products, the ingredients that go into the syrup, the water, the bicarbonate that goes into manufacturing the actual beverage. They don't. Coca-Cola doesn't do the bottling themselves. They've got bottling partners, and those are, and also the distribution companies. From there, it goes into customers, which are, who do they sell to? They don't sell directly to customers. They actually sell to local stores, small shops, etc. And these shops then sell it to the end user, the end customer. And another party that could be considered would then be the recycling plants and the recovery of the tins or the bottles that are after the use of the product. So all of these parties, all these people and participants are participants within the value chain. And on the other side, as I stated, you have these parties over here are referred to as the downstream parties, and the suppliers, the other side, the upstream. Okay, so the activities. What are the activities that should be considered in the management of the supply chain? They include production planning, purchasing, material management, distribution, customer service, and forecasting. And all of these functions are part of the things that are considered in supply chain management. And supply chain management assists with these activities. We've got two types of supply chain models. It's very important that you actually know the differences, because the difference between push and pull systems are often asked in OTQ systems, or OTQ questions. So a push system, that is a traditional system with suppliers on the one end and your customers on the other end. In such a system, the customer is perceived as being the source of profits, and products and services are pushed to them. In this system, suppliers have the most power, and their focus is to increase sales volumes by enticing customers to buy more of what is on offer. So the customer doesn't actually have a choice. They are offered with products and they have to buy it. So if we just look at this on a diagram, you'll see that you have production forecasts. So your distributors, your retailers, they all forecast the possible need or the demand for the product. Then based on that, the manufacturer sources supplies. They send that inventory based on the forecast to the distributor. The distributor then services the retailer, and in the end, the customer has to purchase what is available. If it is not available, if there are stockouts, they can't buy the products. So they don't have any say in the products that are available. A pull system, on the other hand, this is more a new model, which is less product-centric. The focus is on the need of the individual customers. So the individual customer demands are more important, and the customer pull from the system what they need. Customers have a direct voice in the functioning of the supply chain, and the products are not produced until the customer's order. That is quite an important aspect, and that is really the main thing, how these two systems are distinguished from one another. And interesting enough, the reason why we refer to this as a new model, because it is really enabled through electronic connectivity, because through the internet, through customers having a say in products you would actually, this whole system has been enabled. So the electronic connectivity gives customers the opportunity to provide direction to suppliers what they need and what they want. Okay, so within a pull system, we start from this side where we say that the customer order really filters through into the rest of the supply chain. So once a customer places the order, this is filtered through. The manufacturer produces to the order, and they, based on the order that they receive, they order supplies from the suppliers. This then is moved, the specific order is then supplied to the distributor, to the retailer, which then is delivered to the customer. Let's look at an OTQ. So just take a minute and read this OTQ and then answer it. So it's just fill in the missing word. Okay, so let me just read this. Online music stores source music from a wide variety of international artists. The customers are provided with a benefit. So customers to this online music store can benefit by compiling and downloading their own playlist, and consisting only of songs that they want. In exchange, customers pay a fixed monthly subscription fee, and the online music store pays the artist a fee for the songs that has been downloaded. Okay, so this you can see, this is in the past, for those of you who remember, you put the CD, and on that CD you had various songs, and the majority of them you didn't like. You basically bought that CD for the one song. Now with this online music stores, what happened is you only download the songs that you like, and the artists are only being paid for the fee for the songs that's been downloaded. So this is an example of a pull system. So the customer decide what they want, and based on that, it is pulled from the system, because there's a demand from the customer side, which is then pulled out of the system. It is not the system provides you with some, you have to buy whatever's on offer. So this is an example of a pull supply chain. Let's look at the other one. This is C retails vacuum cleaners. The vacuum cleaners of 1,000. Local distributors appoint sales agents that visit customers at home. The agents, through the demonstration, try to convince the customer to buy C's superior quality vacuum cleaner. And this is then an example of a push supply system. The customer are enticed to actually buy what is on offer, and the customer does not have a say on about what is on offer. And this is therefore an example of a push supply chain. But now we're going to look specifically at upstream supply management and how do we interact with the suppliers with our suppliers. And once again, it's referred to as upstream because it is the start of the supply chain. And mainly what this deals with is the procurement and the logistics from the suppliers. So when you decide which suppliers to use, the typical, these are the considerations that you take. Firstly, sources. What do the suppliers, who are they, how many are they, and what do they supply? Where are they, how big are they? And then you also need to consider, do we need different suppliers in different areas? Secondly, the number of suppliers that you want to use. Are you going to use a single supplier or multiple sources? If you look at with supply chain, with successful supply chain management, the aim is to go for a limited amount of supply. And then cost, quality, speed, and reliability of delivery. All of these questions can be asked in order to determine the cost, the quality, the speed of service, the reliability of the delivery. And then moving on to the make or buy decisions, which is the outsourcing decisions. When you consider this, you typically consider the supplier's competency, their technical support, and the quality of the equipment and the products that they can offer. Make and buy decisions or outsourcing decisions will be dealt with in a lot more detail in Chapter 8. Okay, so let's go back to our article answering the question, what are the main risks of supply chain management? Okay, let me just move back to the article again. Okay, so what are the what are the main risks? And this is here on page 2, the second column. They refer to 2 risks here. Firstly, supply chain management and business partners rise to risks in uncertain situations. So if it starts to lose competitiveness, a partner can become a liability because of that partner suddenly they don't have the technology or they haven't kept up with the changes in the supplier and the full of that supply chain to service the customer. It's not as easy to just change your suppliers, and then they could therefore become a liability. And the second thing, the whole supply chain is unlikely that all members will gain equally. So the aim or the objective is for all parties to share in the profits of the supply chain and to share in a fair way. But unfortunately, in the real world, it doesn't happen like that. You often have a lot of stronger parties downstream in the supply chain, and those parties has the most power, and they therefore subdue the bargaining power of other suppliers and of the customers, because the supplier is the only access that other suppliers have into, or contact that the suppliers have with their customers. So this is basically what the other risk is. So the 2 risks, firstly, is that you can't just quickly go, you have long-term relationships, and then typically you have these stronger or power players within a supply chain that could bully, for lack of a better word, the other players within the supply chain. And if you just read this article further, you will see here that they provide you with nice examples of this type of supply system. And if you go and look at I think it's 2018, it's either 2018 or 2019 paper, the June paper. Oh no, not the June paper, the May paper deals with supply chain management, and specifically this whole question around farming. Let's go back again. So typically within a supply chain, because of these power relationships, you can either supply chains are either viewed as antagonism or a partnership agreement. So previously, or sometimes, supply chain witnessed antagonistic relationships within the supply chain, and whereby parties with the highest power sought out lower prices through tendering and leading to frequent changes in suppliers. It also is characterized by heavy penalty clauses, and then typically not negotiable. And the knowledge and the skills of the suppliers are not fully exploited because these suppliers are seen to be too far from the end users to provide a contribution in improving cost effectiveness or trading relationships or supplying the needs of the customers. So this is really previously almost a bully relationship where the strongest parties pull the most profit from the supply chain just because of the fact that they have access to suppliers, which the other smaller parties don't have. And what happens is that often your other parties become dependent on this antagonist to get access to customers. Okay, then versus, as I said, it is recognized provides a lot more benefit to all parties. And what are the characteristics of a partnership agreement? It is organizing organizations into partnerships with key customers and suppliers to better understand how to provide value for customers. So basically in a partnership type of supply chain, what happens is each party understands their role in the supply chain in delivering customer needs or delivering on customer needs. And each of these parties work together on a similar competitive advantage. So both customers and suppliers are involved in the product design and included in discussions, and this often results in a lot of new ideas, solutions, and innovative products being launched. To enhance collaboration, organizations enter into long-term sole source agreements in return for a greater level of support from the supplier and a commitment from them for ongoing improvements and innovation within the supply chain. So let's go back to the article. The next question is, what is the relationship between companies and the level of engagement between parties? Between competency of the different suppliers, different parties, and the level of engagement between parties in the supply chain. So when we look at on page 2, you will see that the level of engagement between links in a supply chain depends on the competency that the business have and what they share. So the first and the most important one are referred to as distinctive competencies, and these are features that give businesses its unique competitive characteristics. And I hope this rings a bell. It is the unique position that a company takes in order to gain a sustainable competitive advantage. So if you have in a successful or beneficial supply chain system, you typically have various parties within the supply chain that have distinctive competencies, and they they basically work together for the supply chain as a whole to gain competitive advantage. Because what is happening currently, it is no longer individual companies that compete with one another, but supply chains that compete with one another. So the idea is that you partner with other companies that have a similar differentiation strategy, and together you partner to meet specific needs of customers. And if you think, if you just look at the examples here that they mention in this article, it says in the 80s and 90s, Mercedes-Benz cars were distinguished by their superior electrical systems, which were supplied by Bosch. In effect, Bosch, which is a lower party that are upstream supply chain, had become a partner in Mercedes-Benz design and manufacturing process. Again, similar here, another example is Procter & Gamble was a long-established, long associate with Walmart Group in their integrated stock and distribution system. The distinctive competency in this case being an effective warehousing and distribution capabilities. So Procter & Gamble helped Walmart to really establish a proper logistics and warehousing system. And this is still Walmart's competitive advantage in the retail space, is the competency in terms of efficient warehousing and logistics. And that's how they actually produce higher margin than their competitors. So it's that the partnering of distinct competencies that benefit all parties to provide that value chain with unique competitive characteristics. Essential competencies, these are the features that companies need to perform well in a specific market. And you need to partner with companies at least that has these essential competencies, because if they don't have it, it is then when, as they said, some partners become a liability to the organization. And then the third, ordinary competencies. Now, these, if a company within the supply chain only has ordinary competencies, this is very routine features, and they don't really provide a lot of benefit within the supply chain. And you can actually substitute that link with any other company because it doesn't really provide any particular benefit. So what the article is arguing is that where you have, so if you just read this in, where two business owners supply are distinctive competencies, they are more likely to engage in supply chain management practices and enter, as we said there, enter the partnership type of supply chain. And a chain containing a number of linked partners can become a virtual business unit, which may start to work as a single operation. And that is really the ultimate position that a supply chain would like to be in. So going back to the slides again. And here we have, some OTQs. So just go back into the OTQ and read this and then try and answer the question. Okay, so have you marked your answers? So firstly, S has an antagonistic relationship with the suppliers. That is true. Why? Because they do not have a partnership. They don't view the partners in the supply chain as or the link in the supply chain as partners. They, as I say here, they don't have sole single suppliers. They choose suppliers based on the ability of price and the availability and price of the fresh produce. Okay, so that is definitely, it fits the description of an antagonistic relationship. Then the supply chain flow follows a pull model. No, it doesn't. Products, the produce are pushed to the customers. The customers do not have a choice. They are offered with products, and also within a push system, the supplier are the most powerful party and not the customer. In this case, the supplier is powerful, so it is number 1. And number 2 is not correct. Number 3, the bargaining power of customers are low. Yes, why? Because customers, have you ever been to a supermarket where you can bargain for price? I don't think so. So you buy the product at the price that is offered. So bargaining power of customers within the system is low, and also the other suppliers are low. Why? Because of the fact that they are dependent on these supermarkets to get their produce to the end user. Also, the pay all their creditors on a 90-day policy, which result in the cash flows of the parties downstream being under stress, and especially that of the farmers. So therefore, does not view the farmers as partners in the supply chain. So the correct answer is number 1, number 3, and number 4. Okay, so if you enter into a partnership agreement or into a relationship, a supply chain management relationship with suppliers or with your customers, it's always important to have a service level agreement, and these service level agreements should include explanation of what the services that you're going to provide, targets and benchmarks, and the consequences of failing those benchmarks, expected response times to technical queries, a time to recover from unplanned disasters such as the coronavirus, how to deal with complaints, information reporting requirements, what information do you need, quality assurance report, quality inspection reports, and those kind of things, procedures for cancelling contracts, and very important is within all of this is that you consider ethical implications. This type of question is often asked, or it's typically asked in case study type of questions, where you need to perhaps have options, where you need to decide whether you're going to enter into a contract with a supplier, or where a supplier were in breach of a service level agreement, and how would you react to, or how would you deal with the ethical implications of that supplier breaching their contract. That is a type of question that often comes up within the CIMA case study exams. So once again, back to the article. So the question asks, what practices are common for a successful supply chain management system? If we go and we would see, they list them here. So it is common supply chain management practices to include the consolidating of the supplier base, where you engage in long-term relationships with your customers. And these long-term relationships are basically facilitated through the following: the coordination of production and inventory policies. So you basically adopt linked production schedules so that businesses, all in all, minimize their stock levels, and this would promote just-in-time manufacturing and shortening the response time, and all of this would result in reduced costs and improve efficiencies within the supply chain. And this is all enabled through linking of IT systems. So data are gathered firstly by the point of sale or the till system, and this is then transferred. This information is transferred immediately to the manufacturer's ordering system. So as soon as economic order quantity is reached, or the optimum order quantity is reached, this is automatically a message is sent to the manufacturers. The goods can be delivered by the manufacturer directly to the retail store where they need it, without the need of an intermediate warehouse or an order system. And this is, as I said, it's all facilitated through electronic data interchange, which is the linking of computer systems. And typically, these systems are the most commonly used ones are SAP and Oracle. And then also another common practice is that you have participation in the product development, because as we spoke about, like that, the Mercedes-Benz versus the Bosch and the Bosch example is that because of the expertise of the different parties, they can each add their unique contribution to the product development. And in the end, what you have is a product that better serves the needs of the customers. And then embedded representation, so that is also a common practice where you have a representative of the company sitting at your warehouse. For example, if you a supplier could supply oxides that is used in manufacturing of bricks. So typically that the supplier has a representative, the supplier of the oxide has a representative on the premise of, or at the factory, the brick factory, and that representative would then provide advice on the quantities of oxide needed, or they could immediately see if the oxide is not used appropriately. So that is what is meant with embedded presentation, where you basically have tech advice on technical issues that is immediately available. We're almost there. So the use of technologies in upstream supply chain management, it's referred to as e-procurement. And e-procurement is the electronic technologies designed to cover the whole purchase cycle, and it includes e-sourcing, which is sourcing of online, sourcing of suppliers online. And this has opened up the possibility of suppliers sourcing international suppliers at cheaper prices, which were not possible in the past. E-purchasing, actually ordering these goods online and buying it online without actually meeting the supplier face to face, and then electronic payment of all these purchases. So you could see that the whole procurement system can be done without or with limited human intervention. That companies use to manage the supply chain. Firstly, I've spoken about the electronic data interchange, the use of internet to shop around and find most reliable and cost-effective suppliers, and then this concept over here, which is referred to as disintermediation. Disintermediation is the process whereby buying supplies online results in cutting unnecessary parties from the supply chain. An example of this would be in the travel agencies, with companies such as Airbnb or Where to Stay coming to the market. You don't really need a travel agent if you would travel overseas or looking for accommodation, because you can do it online. So those intermediates are no longer adding value, and therefore they are cut out of the supply chain. And that concept is referred to as disintermediation. So what are the benefits of proper supply chain management? If you go to your article over here, on page 1, over here, it talks about reduced transaction costs resulting from more stable relationship, reduced demand variability results from improved communication, economies of sales through supply consolidation, reduced administrative costs, reduced logistic costs, shorter time to market, improved responsiveness, etc., etc., and also mass customization, allowing an individual end customer requirements to be accommodated more readily by the actions taken along the whole supply chain. And this, so as I said, the whole benefits of supply chain management is that you can actually allow for this push type of system. Now looking at the benefits of e-procurement, and you can just study this. Firstly, reduce labor costs, reduce inventory holding. Production sales should be higher due to more accurate demand, open a much wider choice, greater financial transparency and accountability, better controls of inventory and quicker ordering, enabling just-in-time. Perhaps just on this end, previously, before proper electronically enabled supply chains, just-in-time systems really just a concept, but this technologies have enabled companies to really implement just-in-time systems. And then the risks of e-procurement, basically these three. The first one is technology risk, and that means that through, say, cyber risk, or that the technologies that just fail, or that company is offline. This could result in the e-procurement not working, and then companies having to fall back on a manual system. Organizational risk, it is the reluctance and fear of people to change to online systems. And then often, as I stated, these supply chain management systems are often highly expensive and cost a lot of money. And these cost savings that should result from implementing the systems are not always realized. And the other uses of technology, or benefits of the use of technology in upstream supply chain management, the use of communication. So it improves communication between links in the supply chain. It improves information gathering, so there are a lot more information shared amongst parties. The use of extranets, and we'll talk about extranets a little bit later in the chapter. The use of big data to improve product offering. And big data is because of all these information that is now available, because of this collaboration, companies can use big data to improve the product offering. And the use of big data is really using these big data sets and determining customer trends. And in the end, you can offer better services. So use of big data would, for example, be Netflix that would look, or Amazon that look at your buying behavior, and different types of clients that has similar buying behavior, and based on what you bought previously, they recommend different things for you. And therefore, because of this use of big data, they pick up trends in buying behavior, they can offer better products. Blockchain, the use of blockchain to enhance security of transaction costs in the value chain. And you can have a look in your textbook. There are a lot of nice examples on how blockchain is used. The blockchain, basically, the benefit is that information that is stored in the block cannot be altered. So it is a secure way of moving information or securing information from one party to another party, and authenticate that information. And the example that they used was on the soil company, where how they used it was that each party in the supply chain could verify the ingredients that was included in the product, and customers could then verify the actual content that was included on the nutrition labels to ensure that whatever is included in the label is actually what is included in the product. And this is done through this blockchain authentication. And then cloud computing enhances the speed and information flow. Just in terms of big data, blockchain, and cloud computing, these topics will be covered in a lot of detail when we get to digital strategy. And then downstream supply chain management, we will cover in our next session. What I would suggest you do now is to go to page 162 of your textbook, and you will see that there's a test your understanding question 3, which deals with upstream supply management, and you need to give examples. So what I would like us to end off with is that you actually go through the test your understanding question and then answer the required. The answer for that required, you will find the end of chapter 5 on page 185. I think this is quite a nice question because it tests various aspects that you can actually identify parties downstream in the supply chain, and then also suggest ways in which to manage those supply chain better, or suppliers, linkages in the supply chain to better service the need of the end user. Okay, so I'll speak to you again in our next session when we will be covering the downstream supply chain management.